Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea, and I am one of your hosts. Welcome to the We the Youth, You the People Town Hall series. These town hall series are youth led and is a place for the youth voice to be seen and heard.
Hi, I'm Jess, and I will also be your host today. The objective for today is to lay the foundation for a youth agenda. The youth agenda will be presented to upcoming mayoral candidates and other elected officials. So I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce my co-host, Chelsea. Chelsea Cohen is 17 years old and is a rising senior at Great Neck North High School. Chelsea has always been interested in the law. She practically grew up watching Law and Order. Chelsea took a law class in 10th grade and became interested in human rights. Racial disparities within the justice system attracted her immensely, but she struggled to find a way to do anything about it. When Chelsea's guidance counselor told her about the governor's New York State Youth Council, she didn't hesitate to apply. Through the state, she was able to meet the members of My Brothers, Sisters, Keepers Council. The council has provided Chelsea with leadership and organizational skills which helped her and some friends carry out several educational gatherings, protests, and vigils in response to the nation's recent unrest.
Thanks, Jess. And now I'm going to share my co host background as well. Jessica Parretto is a college student at Baruch, majoring in public affairs, where she intends to finish and get a master's degree in public administration. She aspires to open a nonprofit and become the CEO of Compact Housing and Security amongst the youth who are forgotten and left to fall through the cracks of the system. She also, in the meantime, would love to work for the child welfare system and hopes to contribute positive changes to future children who may have come across these agencies. She's an adopted child who has been in foster care and has had multiple experiences with multiple child welfare agencies. As a senior in high school, she had the opportunity to work with the Intergenerational Change Initiative as a youth researcher. She currently still works as a youth researcher with the ICI team. Jessica uses research and personal experiences to influence change in New York City for all youth. So now we're going to switch to the agenda for today. So first up, we have what is systemic racism. Next, we're going to go over some community guidelines. Then we'll have expression with a purpose, discuss conversations with youth experts. There will be a Q&A, expression with the purpose once again, then our dropping gem segment, a Q&A, our call to action, and then our closing.
So now we're going to review some community guidelines. We will be respectful of one another. We will have an open mind. We will feel safe to share our thoughts, and we will not judge anyone. Do we all agree with these community guidelines? If you have a question, please drop it in the chat in all caps. Well, now that we're all in agreement, let's move on.
So today's topic is systemic racism, but what is it? Systemic racism is the systemic design of public and private policies in government or private institutions to oppress a group of people. Through the creation of these policies on the local, state, and federal level, said policies prevent oppressed groups from accessing equal and equitable institutions such as education, healthcare, justice, housing, and economic improvements. So, has anyone in the audience ever experienced systemic racism? Feel free to just put a thumbs up or comment yes in the comments and we'll display them. While we wait, I can definitely say that I've experienced systemic racism, but because it's divided in different institutions, personally, I've never been impacted by the educational aspect of it because I go to a school with a lot of resources. So we have to remember that it can be divided up a lot. And we can see by the comments that a lot of people have been impacted by systemic racism, which is why it's such an important topic to be talking about today.
So now we're going to show a short film of the documentary on the late Congressman and civil rights leader, John Lewis.
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
So now that we saw this short film, What necessary trouble do you think we should get into with this youth agenda? Chelsea, as we wait for the audience, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, given the current climate with COVID-19 and everything, it was extremely difficult for people to get permits because large gatherings were kind of not what we were supposed to be doing. But with everything that was occurring, people kind of overlooked that and decided that this is too important to not be in the streets protesting for and not talking about it. And in theory, that did cause some trouble. A lot of people were upset about always having roads closed down or always having large gatherings, but it was good and definitely necessary trouble because now people are starting to pay attention to what's really going on.
I agree. Thanks for that feedback, Chelsea. So now, if nobody else has anything to say, we have a wonderful person who's gonna give us some spoken word, and her name is Jalissa Lacoon. So I will be introducing Jalissa. So Jalissa is known through her alias Dare Bear. She is a pro-Black Jamaican and Guyanese American spoken word artist. In love with poetry from a young age, she started attending open mics in her senior year of high school, as well as she began attending urban word workshops. She now has a group EP out on SoundCloud with Urban Word New York City called Got Bars and continues to write poetry. She loves exploring different poetry techniques, and her work is commonly filled with metaphors and allusions. Under the guidance of influences and poets such as Roya Marsh and Chanel Gabrielle, Jalissa has been able to continuously hone her craft and grow not only as a poet, but also as a spoken word artist. Let's give a round of applause for Jalissa Lacoon.
Implied whippings couldn't. Because grades can make me cry the way implied whippings couldn't. The way they disrespect me, spew hatred of unintelligence, fit me in a Syracuse sweater as a joke, make me itch in unworthiness because strangers I don't know set the standards of my brilliance. Because connecting the dots of how your system is set against me is an equivalent to finding X of how many fucks I don't give, but then privilege doesn't exist. Except when I walk into a room with a bunch of people who don't look like me, my brilliance is automatically the size of a mustard seed. I'm dissected like a frog from your curriculum, sectioned into the ghetto. Oh, what's this? A hint of ratchet, a fucked up childhood, and extra points if you can locate the father who never came back. But then, when I talk about Henry Box Brown, we'll touch on that more in February. Well, sir, it's relevant now, but my Black voice makes me disrespectful because grades can make me cry the way implied whippings couldn't, and I don't cry. Because grades is an allegory, because my feelings are hurt, because implied whoopings couldn't make me cry, but forced feedings of grades that don't reflect me could. You grabbed me by my throat. I started suffocating from all the overwhelming propaganda. And as I hovered over that student to prison pipeline, I realized implied whoopings never made me cry. But you fucking did. Thank you. My name is Jalissa. Back to the host. Thank you.
Thank you, Jalissa. That was great. If you guys love that as much as I did, feel free to comment and send some positivity her way. Next up, we're going to transition into the youth expert segment. And our first moderator is going to be Rayan Quadir. He is 17 years old, turning 17 years old, and entering 11th grade at the Michael J. Petriti School in the fall. He has always been very active in his community and enjoys giving back to New York City. He is also a member of the Governor's New York State Youth Council. Rayan remembers a time in his life when he felt more safe living in the city and there was much less tension than there is today. He says there is so much to fight for that shouldn't have to be fought for, so he decided it was time to take a stand and help make this city better than it has ever been. Being a part of the MBSK Youth Council has motivated Rayan to turn negativity and violence into a better future, and he aspires to attend college and start his own family. Now I'm going to pass it to Jess to introduce the next moderator.
So I'll be introducing Curvins. Curvins is a 21-year-old freelancer photographer with an interest in racial equality and immigration since high school. Curvins jumped at the chance when he learned about MBSK Youth Council. The council has provided the opportunity for his voice to be heard and be an advocate for those who can ring the bell on behalf of the voiceless. Curvins also joined MBSK for the chance to work on his leadership skills and learn how to interact with his peers and navigate contradictory ideas. Curvins plans to join the U.S. Army to follow his passion for vehicles and to build his skills so that he can take his business to the next level. Above all, he aspires to work with Tyler Perry Studios.
Hello everyone, and I'm going to be introducing Daniel. Daniel is 18 years old, is an 18-year-old youth organizer and student at Borough of Manhattan Community College. Since childhood, Daniel says he imagined making a difference in the world, even while trying to decide whether to become a lawyer, firefighter, or public servant. It wasn't until he joined Red Hook Initiative that Daniel found his true calling, medical social work. As a young organizer at RHI, Daniel visited tenant association meetings, completed certifications in becoming a seasoned community organizer, and collaborated with other programs to learn more about making this imperfect world a better place and to lead a good example of why compassion is essential to creating a space that is meaningful and sacred. Daniel plans to transfer to the University of Chicago to complete an undergraduate degree in social sciences, pursue a master's to become a licensed clinical social worker. Passing it to Curvins.
Hey everybody, my name is Curvins and I will be introducing Lucia. Lucia Paz of Brooklyn is a rising junior at Barnard College with a passion for social justice, issues focusing on racial and LGBTQ plus injustice in education. She is the Harlem Outreach Chair for the Barnard Organization of Soul Sisters, BUS, a club founded in the 1960s to promote the physical and mental well-being of Black women and femmes on campus. Lucia's advocacy includes a volunteer trip to Grenada as part of the There Is Hope campaign with Columbia University's Caribbean Student Association. There, she taught elementary school-age students about social justice issues and self-empowerment. She has also worked with Henry Street Settlement, helping to connect Lower East Side residents with opportunities and resources. Lucia plans to spend the spring 2021 semester at Spelman College and aspires to work with the New York City agencies to positively impact her communities. Passing it back to Ryan.
I will also be introducing Elijah Green, youth organizer. Elijah Green is a 16-year-old student at Broome Street Academy whose passion for community, racial equity, and the arts has led him to activism and service. Elijah's participation with the Possibility Project has given him the opportunity through theater arts to bring awareness, life, and voice to issues that young people face every day. Bullying, social acceptance, sexual orientation, discrimination, and gender identity bias, in addition to volunteering with the Bravo EMT youth program in Bay Ridge. He is part of the NYPD Explorers program, where he is considering a career in law and public service. Most recently, Elijah helped form the grassroots NYC Marchers movement to speak out against police brutality. Elijah's belief in equity constantly inspires him to act as a bridge and be a catalyst for a change while standing firm as an advocate for those most in need. Bringing it back to Curvins.
I will also be introducing Sushana. Sushana Brown is a first-generation college graduate and an intern at the Kairos Center and the Poor's People campaign. The National Call for Moral Revival. The campaign builds on work by the Poverty Initiative with a goal of abolishing poverty in the U.S., while connecting with global movements for economic justice. Sushana is an immigrant who came to the United States only 5 years ago to pursue an education in social work and human rights. The internship has completed her education by providing opportunities to give a voice to the voiceless and travel to Albany to fight for fair housing and healthcare. I feel like I'm doing something for other people. It feels like I'm being selfless, but advocating for myself as well. Everyone has a story.
I'm going to be asking some questions. Daniel, name a social movement that interests you right now and why.
So, a social movement that I would love to say that really interests me currently is the Black Lives Matter movement, because like we're living in very like severely racist times, and also like a lot of people have been let down in the system, and people need to see that no matter what you are, or no matter where you come from, you should not be discounted for. Everyone has a right to be here, especially when people of color.
Passing it to Curvins.
Yeah, my question is for Lucia. Lucia, are you currently or have you ever been directly involved with any social movements? If so, how? Nobody can hear me?
I think Lucia is having some connection issues.
Yeah, because she said she can't hear me. All right, so I may change the question to Sushana. So I will ask you the same question. Are you currently or have you ever been directly involved with any social movement? And if so, how?
Yes, been interning slash volunteering with Poor People's Campaign, and that experience I started January of this year, and we went to Albany, we went to DC, we went to Rochester, and we were fighting for the rights of people. Housing rights, healthcare. So that was a very interesting experience for me because that was the first time I was actually outside protesting, being with the people, and it was just a great feeling because you know people of all different colors, all walk of life, different stories came together for one purpose, and it made me feel so invigorating. I was like chanting all day, and I was like, I stood up my voice. I was like, wow. I was like, it just gave me so much power, and I feel like you know being a part of the movement, as like, I would say that it opened doors for me to actually realizing what I really enjoy doing. So that's all I would say in terms of the movements. Like, thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Passing it back to Ryan.
Lucia, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many empowered? How on a scale to one? Oh my goodness! On a scale from 1 to 10, how empowered do you feel about making positive impacts? I think Lucia is still having some connection
Connection
issues.
issues. Yeah.
Elijah, are you currently or have you ever been directly involved with any social movements?
Yes, well, I've been involved with the Black Lives Matter movement. As you know, around this time, we've dealt with police brutality, and it's an important issue that needs to be talked about. And while we're talking, there's certainly some things that need to be changed in that topic of police brutality.
I definitely agree with you. That's one of the major reasons why I actually joined MBSK and the Youth Council, because kids in my school and kids around me were being treated differently. And I was really the only one who noticed in my grade, because I noticed as a child that I was much more mature than some of my other friends. And I noticed what was happening. MBSK, by the way, is a program it's called My Brother and Sister's Keeper. So yeah, I just noticed that, people weren't being treated the same, and I knew it's because of race and, ethnicity. And, because other people look different. Even in a society like New York City, there is still so much inequality and inequity. So that's what really motivated me to join MBSK. So I'm really happy that we connect on that.
Yeah.
Passing it back to Curvins.
So my question will be for Daniel. So Daniel, have you ever been a victim of systemic racism? And if yes, and if you also feel comfortable, would you mind sharing with us?
No, I've never been a victim of systemic racism, and yeah, and I don't really have a story for it.
All right. But yeah, since you haven't been a victim of structural racism, what do you think about structural racism, and what other young people like your peers or people older than you or people of color like who actually might have been big victim of structural racism, maybe like they didn't know that it was structural racism, probably like because like somebody didn't call them the N word, but they didn't have the equal opportunities about like housing, money, and education. So what do you think about that, and how we can just like probably improve it, change it?
So, what I think about systemic racism is that, well, it's very much the worst thing in the world because people who are being targeted, who are being marginalized, who are being like left out of everything, it's really unfair because people should have access to a system that should remain impartial and should not be treating people different because like at the end of the day, we're all human beings who are trying to like get by no matter how many times, no matter how many times the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And like people who are like using like racial slurs just to make people feel bad about themselves, they're not making it any better. Like no one's better than anyone. We're all human beings, and but at the same time, systemic racism should not have a place in a society where everyone should be created equal, especially in a place like New York as well.
Yeah, but like also like systemic racism is not so black, like also blatant, like or something like you just like really see, because you probably, I don't, I'm just like don't want to just like say you directly, or like probably
Yeah,
me, or probably like any other like one of like people that we know probably have been a victim of systemic racism, but like it's just like we just didn't know how it is actually. For example, a research showed that when you have a sounding black name, it's just like you have less chance of getting called by a job, like when you make a job application, than
yeah,
when you have a white sounding name. So probably like you have been like somebody may have been a victim of it, but like it's just like you can even know or tell what it is. Sound like the same also. It's just like my name, I have a French sounding name because I'm partly Haitian and French. So I have a French sounding name. If I come here and then just say go to the bank and ask for a credit, either to build a business or even get a loan to pay for my school or also housing, I may not even get a chance to get it because they're gonna be like, okay, your name doesn't sound, at least like not being biased, they probably will be like your name doesn't even sound white. So what makes us believe that you're probably gonna be able to pay back, or you're worth for us to give you the money to do whatever you're trying to do? This is what people like literally like kind of fail to understand. It's just like systemic racism is so wide as a subject, and what's been happening. It's just like probably like they be thinking like, okay, systemic racism is just like, okay, I got pulled over by the cops. He asked me like my papers and stuff like that just because like he came to my door, to my window with his hand on his gun. That's systemic racism. But the thing is just like systemic racism goes literally like deeper than that, like with even some parts of where you actually live. It's actually like some neighborhood, if you feel like about the Hampton, see how it's being treated, and look at Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
Look at some neighborhood in Brooklyn. Like I'm gonna say, like I live in Canarsie. Look at how Canarsie is being treated, and when you go like up in Brooklyn, see how Flatbush is being treated. So it's all about systemic racism. See how the stores are being treated. See what kind of products that they offer to us, like to buy. There's nothing. Absolutely, I'm not gonna say there's nothing, but it's literally hard to find something that is being naturally raised. Like, for example, I remember I went to a store. It was just like all about farm raised products, like farmers fish, farmers. But it's just like when you have those stuff, like, and you injecting those stuff in your system, it's just okay. They bring you sickness and everything like that. But if you go to some other rich neighborhoods, like, or at least like predominantly white neighborhoods, it's more about like natural stuff. That's when you find those green zone and everything like that. So that's actually like how we all, like people of color, probably have been victim of systemic racism, but actually like we didn't really see what it was actually, or didn't have enough knowledge to see what was going on and what was happening. And that's why I think like school, and also, yeah, also the parents and friends in church, they need to make more education about just like trying to just like keep the students, like keep kids, young people knowing about what systemic racism is, because it's not all about like when you encounter a cop, how to react, how to
Yeah.
talk. Because you're gonna see when you go to certain school, like when the kids are talking, they just be cursing. All right. I think like it's actually some education like that's is like actually missing. And they not gonna tell you because actually like you're kid of color. They got oh, it's fine. It's what they do. You see what I'm saying? And they're gonna be like, oh, it's what they do. But I remember like Rand gave me the permission to share that story about how he got in trouble, like just because like he fought in his like with somebody. I don't know if you give me permission, Ray, to share that story.
Um, yeah.
System of systematic racism. And because in my school, when you get in trouble, it's not the same for everyone. You know, when I get into a fight, it was not the same as someone else who got into a fight who was a different, he was different complexion. You know, he was darker, he was a man of color. And since I'm lighter, I didn't get in as much trouble as the other kids did. So that's my that's how I was treated, and it's really upsetting. So the next question is going to be for Aaliyah. Aaliyah, what are some ways that we as a community can help combat structural racism?
Hi, it's actually we can combat structural racism is just being upstanders in our everyday lives. So like upstanding against situations such as microaggression, that's a form of racism. Constantly voicing our opinions, constantly using our platforms, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Instagram, because we each can be activists in our own everyday lives. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like, sorry about the noise, but those are just a few examples of how we could be upstanders and combat structural racism. Racism is by speaking up against it once we come in contact with it, and not being bystanders. We all need to be upstanders and practice that.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. I love your commitment, and I totally agree with you 100%. Um, that was really great. Kicking it back to Curvins.
Lucia, I don't know if you can hear me now. All right.
Yes, and
Since you didn't get to answer my question earlier, I'm just like gonna rewind it back to you. It was have you I'm gonna just actually ask you the same question I asked Daniel. Have you ever been a victim of structural racism from your knowledge? And if yes, would you mind or would you be comfortable sharing with us?
I think as a Black queer woman, we all have in our rights, and I think you touched on it that it isn't just a blanket statement like systemic racism. Like it's a real tangible thing, and there's so many different aspects and levels to it. Um, One of the ways where it hit me and I didn't even know that it was like part of my life was, well, two of the ways was in the healthcare industry, specifically related to like food, and I think you touched on that, but I didn't realize like just how much or how like the government really like was able to, I don't even know how to describe it, but the amount of the what food is available in our neighborhoods versus different neighborhoods, I currently go to Barnard College, which is one of the colleges of Columbia University. And the food there versus the food, because I'm from Flatbush, Crown Heights, so the food over here versus the food over there is so different. Like, you don't see a McDonald's until you go deeper into Harlem. You don't see a White Castle, a Burger King, a bodega on every block. Like, that is such a very, there's just so many different layers to it. And then the second thing that I definitely noticed was in the the medical industry. Rather, I had went to the hospital in September, and I was just like feeling extreme pain. And the doctors were just like, they kept telling me, "Oh, you're crazy. This isn't real. Like, we're running these tests and we don't see anything." And that was just like really heartbreaking to me, because it was like, I'm not making up this pain. And then I don't know if it was a coincidence or what happened afterwards, but I just started seeing a bunch of articles of like Black women sharing their stories of how they felt pain either through pregnancy or just in their like lower abdomen, and they were not getting the treatment they needed. And that like really scared me, because it showed me that I wasn't just an anomaly. It was like, that's a real thing. People don't believe that Black women experience pain. So yeah,
Yeah,
it
so that
really started.
mhm.
No, go ahead,
Yeah,
go ahead.
oh, all right. Yes, because I do remember something that one of my friends, we were having that discussion about, like how they literally think like Black women are built as iron castle or whatever they just like think Black women are built of. It seems like they making that image that Black women are not able to feel pain. And just the same thing, like when you just like literally goes to a hospital and it's just like, okay, if you're a Black woman, the doctor takes less time talking to you or even trying to figure out what's not going on right with you. Like I feel like, or compare like to a white women, like when they go to the hospital, you see the amount of tests that they run for them, see how they take care of them. That's literally also like, and that's a problem also, because like I would just like literally go back to something that's like just deeper in the school system about like when they literally not even encouraging Black kids to even read a book. It's just like I'm going with Malcolm X, what he once said when he said, if you want to hide something from a Black man, put it in a book, because he's not gonna go look for it. And it's crazy enough that they not encouraging like Black young guys to just like read a book. See, when you go to school, if they give you a book to read, they ask you to do some work. See how they give you much alternative like for you not to read the book and give the work back. They tell you, okay, if you don't want to read the book, you can do this or you can do that. Compared to like when a white kid in a white school have something to read just to give a work back. See how they push it through. You're not giving the book back, okay, you're not getting your grade. You can't play in the basketball team. You can't play in the volleyball team. You can't take part of this trip or that. You can't take part of this activity taking place in the school. Just why? Because you didn't finish a book that they give you to read. Somebody once told me, if you have a kid and you give him $10 for every great action that he did, he's gonna grow up with an employee mindset. But if you actually give him $10 for every book that he read, he's gonna grow up actually with a millionaire mindset. Steve Jobs literally like read a bunch of book every day, and he uses like literally self-confidence, like standing in front of the mirror every morning and ask himself, if today was my last day, would I be happy doing what I'm about to do right now? Bill Gates actually listens to audiobook while working out every morning. See how successful all those people are. It's because like they read something from a book and they learn from each other. Somebody who write a book is because like they have a story to share. It's because they want to empower you about like what they've been through. And then they want to just like give you the opportunity also that, okay, that's what I've been through. And if you also like give yourself the opportunity to be what you call this again, discipline, self-discipline. I'm wondering, like in the audience, like how many of your parents literally like taught you self-discipline growing up? Like if I'm going back to my background, like my Haitian background, there are some stuff that I was not allowed to do in the house. There are some stuff that I was supposed to do. There are also some stuff like that my dad literally like used to, because my dad growing up, he literally trained me as a military, as a soldier when I was growing up. That's why like it's hard for me to get myself into some type of troubles. Because why? It's because of the education, the way I was raised. It's just I learned to think twice about whatever I'm going to do, and the self-discipline. And it's something that needs to be just like included in education. And if school is not ready to do that, I think it's our job as young kids to literally just like, because to talk about it, like to teach self-discipline to our peers, because they mostly will listen to us instead of listening to an adult. And that's why, like MBSK, which I'm wearing the t-shirt now, my brothers and sisters keeper youth council, I jumped into the opportunity of just like getting to know them and work with them the minute they said it in high school. Because why? I like wanted to just like work on my leadership, on how I could evolve, like bring positivity to my peers. Because I see what's going on in Brooklyn now. It's not hard to change. I see what's going on in the US and Black kids. It's not hard to change. It's just if we're willing to put the work in, if we're willing to fight to change something, to show them, okay, we as young people, positive, we as young Black folks can also do what you guys are doing. We can also take the lead and change and bring a change to the country. Of course, they're going to listen to us. And that's why, like, I remember one of my teacher was telling me something back. I went to Rome with her, Sydney Thomas. I remember she was telling me at some point when we were separated from the white community, it was great for us. I remember, I forgot the term that she employed. I think segregation. Yeah. She was actually telling me that segregation had a good part in it. I literally couldn't really like see what was going on until she literally like we had a whole hour discussion about it. And she was telling me if we were segregated and we only had to support Black people, you would see how quick it would go that we would be empowered. See how like when somebody actually like when you as a young people, like you as a young person of color, literally just like bring a business up, see how they literally treat you. They don't care. They're going to Berber. All respect to those businesses. But I think like it's where they literally see like it's okay. Structural racism is right there just because, okay, we're not young people are not literally just like bringing up their community. They bringing us up. And I think like that's where we need to just like start from the root first and literally just like keep going until we get to the top and fight that structural racism, because it's not hard to change until we just like put the work in to do it.
That was great, Curvins. Daniel, I want to ask you one more question. Sorry. Do you know what structural racism actually is? Like, what does the meaning mean to you?
I actually do not know, in all honesty, but I think it's pretty similar to systemic racism.
Pretty much, yeah. Structural racism pretty much is racism happening in between different companies and different, structures of government and different structures of, mass societies. For example, schools, governments, it can even be libraries and restaurants. Some people may not even be accepted into a restaurant because of their race and because of their background. So that really is the definition of structural racism. What does that mean to you, Daniel?
Ray, I actually have something about structural racism. Does that include public housing?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Because I'm a resident of New York. Because I'm a resident of New York City Housing Authority, and there were some, and I've heard like some stories from people. I never physically like witnessed like structural racism happening in public housing, but I've heard like stories from like many different residents that I grew up with. So I wanted to point it out. I'm sorry if I sound a little nervous. It's just, yeah.
No, it's totally fine. I wanted to ask you one more question, I think. Elijah, what does structural racism mean to you? Other than the actual definition, what does it mean to you personally?
Well, you see, structural racism, to me, it's racism in systems that we use in society, like the education system, the justice system. It's a way that these systems are created to give white people an advantage and put them in, put non-white people at a disadvantage in certain places, in certain organizations. What I mean by organizations is, certain companies, like in that's involving the education and the justice system both by itself.
So, Alea, I think I got a question for you now. Um, how have you been just like trying to involve young people like you in the fight for structural racism other than what you've started, and how long have you started? What gave you the passion to start what you started?
So I think my passion comes a lot from me experiencing racism in high school. I haven't been experienced or exposed to it until I went to a predominantly white institution. And within my first week, one of my friends were crying in the bathroom because these two white kids were picking on her. And the teacher, who was white faculty, he had the nerve to ask the white boys if we were bothering him. So that was my first experience. And I was more so in a bubble. I didn't really know that I was black, and I didn't know what a black woman meant. I didn't know what a minority meant. And I didn't know what it meant to be a part of a community. So my freshman year of high school, I enrolled in this summer institute called the Octavia Project, and the founders were white. And they taught me a lot about myself, and so did the people around me, because they were all minorities, from different cultures and different ethnicities. So I started to grow and learn more about myself and learn about my power as a black woman in America and as a minority. And I took that and I ran with it. And I think that's where my passion comes from. And I really, now that I know and I'm knowledgeable, I'm not going back, because ignorance
All
is
right. So,
bliss.
also like, what are the next steps that you think like you're gonna be taking in order just like to keep fighting with your passion and just like make positive impact?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking me that question, Currens. The next steps for me right now is to, do anything that I can with whatever I can, with whatever platform I can at any capacity. Because like I said previously, we're all activists. We can all be activists within our own home, within our own lives, privately, whether that's arguing with family members, setting them straight on their conservative ideas, whether it's educating a friend, but do it in a not so toxic way, because I feel as though call out culture is toxic. Do it in a nice way and approach it in a nice way so that people can hear you and not see you for being angry, and so they're not misguided. But definitely, like I said, just educating people, educating yourself, and just trying to be involved as much as you can.
All right. Thank you. I'm passing it back to Ryan. Ray, you muted.
So sorry about that. That was awesome what you said, Alea. And I have a question for Sushana. Sushana, what do you want to see happen differently with systemic racism in New York City?
Yes. What do I want to see? Well, systemic racism, well, in terms of it's being targeted to like people of color, and I would love to see like a stop being put to it. You know, everyone deserve the right to be treated equally, and not just some people. You know, everyone. And I feel like in New York City, um, how would I say it? New York City is very independent in terms of like protesting, fighting for rights, and we do let our voice be heard to get changes. So I feel like with the continuous work with the different movements coming together as one, I feel like we can get the change in terms of like, I wouldn't say like eliminated it to that extent, but like actually seeing some changes where we could say that um all the hard work that we put in and the sacrifices of our forefathers and many people before us that did the walk lose their life and stuff like that. Like I feel like if just by continuing and being unified, I feel like that could lead to like listening. I wouldn't say stopping it. I would love for it to stop, but you know, yeah, it doesn't seem like that is something that we could get right away because we've been fighting for our rights for a long time. So with that being said, I feel like just getting little changes that lead up to the big thing is more feasible at the moment for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to say, and it's sad to say, but
Thank you.
racism in general is embedded in the roots of America. And it's something we really have to fight to break down and pull out, passing it to Curvins.
All right, thank you, Ray. Lucia, the following question is for you. What are some ways that you think we as a community can combat, can fight structural racism?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Curvins?
Oh, yeah. I was asking, what are some way that we as a community can combat structural racism?
I think some ways are definitely involvement, being more involved in your community. Like, as there's something missing within your community, um, you know, sorry, if there's something missing within your community, maybe you as a youth, you as a person, an individual being, can do something, like create something that's not there. Whatever you feel that is missing within your community, within your neighborhood, do something about it. Create it. Gather people. You know what I'm saying? Start a conversation within your neighborhood. It just starts with one person, one idea, one thought, and we could definitely do it. I feel as though as youth, we feel like we can't really do much because we're so young, but ignore that. Throw that mindset away. That's just society telling you can't do something. But we can definitely do it if we put our minds to it. Just all starts with an idea. It all starts with a thought. Just continue to be involved.
All right. Thank you. And thank you so much to all the panelists for participating and answering our questions. And now, like, I think it's time for us to move to the Q&A to the Q&A section, probably like getting some questions from the audience.
Let's see what we got.
Definitely.
Carlene Pinto, she doesn't have a question, but she did say riots are not what's happening in NYC. These are strategic actions that are non-violent, demanding policy change. I totally agree with that.
I think Omosifi Norua, she said, or he was, she, I don't know, said institutional racism examples underfunded schools, lack of attention from the medical industry, lack of housing, police brutality, punishment in schooling. Totally agree with that. Especially from the lack of attention. Oh, Ryan.
What's your biggest fear being a Black man? Curvins, I think that question is towards you because I'm actually mixed.
Yeah, definitely. So, my biggest fear being a Black man, I'm not gonna say that. I'm literally just like be putting in my mind that I don't fear none, but actually, like, it's something that I'm more worried. Like, I don't know how to word it. It's like, if it's something that I'm worried about, or if it's something that I really just like fear. But I'm gonna just like put it in the fear right now. Just like, it's actually making an encounter with a police officer who's actually like purely doesn't deal with like people of color or was not educated to accept us as who we are, or actually even just like getting some health issue and just like going to the hospital and getting somebody who just like literally just like don't care about like people of color and losing my life due to that. That's actually one of my biggest fear as a Black man. But after that, overall, I wouldn't say that I fear none. It's just like I'm just like ready to fight through anything.
What do you think about gentrification? I'm not really sure what I think about gentrification. I haven't had a lot of time to think about it. It's not something that I don't really know. I haven't really worked on it a lot. So that's the question I'm gonna have to work on. But does anyone else, Curvins, do you have an answer for that question? I'm not really sure how I'd answer that.
Also, like gentrification is not a subject that I really just like made research like so much research about. I'm gonna have to make more researches about it, just like to see what I can tell in order to just like be more knowledgeable before I even talk about the subject. It says, does Maurice
Also,
events? Go ahead.
okay. I was just going to say gentrification, in my opinion, it just keeps putting it keeps racism in practice, and it puts colored people at disadvantage because it's more for the middle class wealthy, and housing is not affordable. And I think it's just another modern way of colonization, just because we have these white people moving in, and without total regardment of the people that are already in that community.
All right. Maurice events. Does speaking about race with non BIPOC make you nervous? And if so, how do you deal with it? From my personal opinion, speaking about race with non-black people or BIPOC, I don't really know what it means. Doesn't really make me nervous. I actually enjoy having those type of discussion with somebody that doesn't come from the same ethnicity as me, because I feel like there's so much I can teach them and so much also I can learn from them so we can share. But I don't know if Daniel or Elijah, does that make you guys nervous, like talking about like race with somebody that does not come from the same ethnicity? And if so, how do y'all deal with it?
May I answer this?
Yeah, you could go.
I try to avoid talking about my race because I'm half Puerto Rican and I'm half Irish, and like some people like some people who like ask me, I just tell them I prefer not to say, because I know like how like I know what some people might say because I've seen it do it to other people, so that's why I try to avoid it altogether, because sorry. All right. I try to avoid it altogether because I know like some of the reactions they might have, some of the reactions I might have, and I try to just say, hey, I prefer not to talk about race, because that's a topic I prefer not to discuss, because I'm a very like introverted person and I keep to myself, especially about topics that involve race.
There's another question, but I just wanted to add on, like, having these conversations is necessary, and sometimes, like what Kervin said, like, it's great because we get to educate others, but also it's really not our jobs to educate other people. The same way we educate ourselves, they can get a book, they can go on Google, because Google has everything online for them to educate themselves, and I think it's more uncomfortable for them. But this is our life. This is our livelihood. We need to speak on it. We need to, sometimes it sucks, but we have to justify our existence when we shouldn't have. But that was a great question. Thank you for asking it.
All right.
That was a great answer, Alea. So the next I'm sorry, Kevin, did you want to just say something? Okay. So Elijah's Arrington, was there a time where you saw a problem when someone was being racist to someone and he was afraid to speak up, so you said something? Yeah, that was pretty much why I got into a fight with someone in school when I was younger. In 8th grade, I got into a fight with someone about race and about how, he was literally bullying me and my friend. And I hated it. So my friend, because like he originally bullied my friend and then he came to me and started saying stuff about me. So I got in the middle of it and I fought him. And he actually ended up being a guy he was black. And I didn't get in as much trouble at the time, which I don't know why. I just didn't get in trouble. I was completely cleared of the situation. But the kid that, because like it was a physical fight. Yeah, he was bullying me, but it was a physical fight. And then later on, I had another fight, like later on, years later. And it was between me and a white kid. And I got in a lot much more trouble. And it was about the same thing. It was about race, and it was about, insulting one another. And it was just so upsetting that I didn't get in trouble when I was beating up, a black person rather than when I was beating up. I hate to say it that way, but that's how it's put. That's how I can put it. I got in trouble biasly, and even though I was sticking up for my friends. So,
Yeah. Thank you for everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the panelists like who came here. And thank you, Rayan, for also like sharing your story with us.
Absolutely.
And I think it's time for us to pass back to Jess and Chelsea. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, moderators. So now we have a performance by Majorway, and I will be introducing Majorway. Majorway is a Latina MC from the Lower East Side. She began her artistic journey at age 4, dancing ballet at the 3rd Street Music School. Growing up in the Lower East Side, she was involved with dance competitions and theater productions, feeding her hunger to create. Her influences include Lauryn Hill, Queen Latifah, and Miss Elliott, who significantly impacted her love for hip-hop. She can be found taking over ciphers and stages from New York City, Philly, and beyond. Majorway aspires to inspire. The passion in her lyrics and electric energy of her stage presence creates a vibe like no other. Majorway is a truth spitter and go-getter, and the only way to go is up. So let's welcome Majorway.
Thank you, guys. All right. I said, when you look into the eyes, tell me what you see. I see these kids and they begging for their freedom, please. I've been woke ever since I was 18 and living on my own, and the rent ain't cheap. I started rap because I knew there were stories to tell. Like when I lost my mom, felt I was living in hell. I thank God the streets never led me to jail, but the struggle was real. We just gotta prevail, because in this system, they don't want to see us win. This industry is a lottery. The chances are slim. I'm sick and tired of the negative. They thinking that they lit, but everybody's sound is so repetitive. Why Dr. King fought for people to act ignorant? When will we learn our lesson? The media is killing us. They blinding us with reality shows, but the reality is scripted. And it's sending the message sooner or later will be scripted. So we should behave now. Open the Bible, read the scripture. Because being black means we look to follow the description. We're a threat to society. I'm not going to mention. And I'm going to keep it quiet before I get too much attention. Thank you, guys. Back to the host.
Thank you, Majorway. That was great. Everyone feel free to leave comments in under this so that we can send some positivity her way, because that was wonderful. Next up, we're going to transition into our Dropping Gems segment. So I'm going to switch to Jess. She could introduce our first moderator. Jess, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Sue is a rising senior at Fort Hamilton High School. She's an active advocate for social justice regarding education and youth, as well as foster care, while working with multiple organizations and programs. She hopes to continue writing and speaking about civil rights and youth in the future to demand change within the system. So let's give it up for Sue.
The co-moderator that we're also going to be having is Abube Wame. He is 17 years old and currently attends the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and he is going into his second semester in the fall of 2020. He learned of MBSK in high school through the recommendation of a mentor from his after-school program, and he joined the council because he saw it as a platform to use his voice as a young person to effect change in society. Another reason he joined was because it was a great opportunity to participate and engage in youth-related activities. Abube's interest has always been to bring more awareness to the power and voice young people have in society. He sincerely believes the days of the saying that you are the leaders of tomorrow and that leadership should start coming to actualization now. Ubube is interested in doing TV and radio work as well as music.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Jess and Chelsea, for this wonderful introduction. And shout out to everybody that's watching us on all the platforms. This is our Dropping Gems segment, and I'm going to give you back to one of the hosts to introduce Sue.
I think I was introduced.
Oh, you already there?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into this. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ebube Weme, and I will be the host for this Dropping Gems segment. I will also be hosting alongside Sue. And in this particular segment, we have experts joining us at this time. They're experts in this kind of work, highly involved in their communities, and knowledgeable about the issues of structural racism. And we'll be introducing them and asking them questions this afternoon. The first person we'll be introducing is Carlene Pinto. Carlene Pinto. I'm gonna read your introduction. All right. So Carlene is a national civil rights organizer and social entrepreneur. In the last decade, Carlene has championed several legislative reforms and helped countless campaigns fighting for a more just and equitable world. In 2018, Carlene founded NYC Action Lab Inc. to foster and support local grassroots efforts and organizers who seldom receive resources and their seat at the table. Carlene is committed to transforming our communities through educating, organizing, and mobilizing with a focus on alternatives to incarceration and sustaining critical community-based work. Before NYC Action Lab, Carlene was the Federal Immigration Campaign Manager for the New York Immigration Coalition, NYIC, which represents more than 200 organizations across NYS, New York State. And prior to that, served as the Riverside and countless other institutions on the forefront of social justice. And
that's fine. That's fine. We sent in our full bios to be. I would much rather talk about important things. So that's why I pick up that message real quick.
All right, for sure, Carlene. We just wanted to, yeah. I see Carlene arrest the cops who create Breonna Taylor. Thank you for that message. That is something that America needs to address and something that we need to take care of. But thank you so much, Carlene, for joining us this afternoon. Over to you, Sue.
Okay, so the next expert that we have is Dr. Samuel A. Amer. Dr. Samuel A. Amer is an associate professor at Silberman School of Social Work, Hunter College, where he teaches clinical practice with individuals and families. His scholarly endeavors center on the intersection of masculinity, African American men, race, trauma, intimate partner violence, fatherhood, and psychotherapeutic interventions. He has developed training modules, seminars, and workshops designed to educate clinicians about trauma, violence, intimate partner abuse, diversity, and the lived experiences of Black families affected by race-related trauma. He conducts public lectures on family violence, trauma, African American lifestyle issues, cross-cultured counseling, and diversity. It's actually pretty amazing that we have such a variety of inspirational people on this call.
For sure. Thank you so much for this great people joining us, the experts joining us to, facilitate and talk about in this particular segment. We also have Tavina Willis. I'm going to introduce her. Tavina Willis is a lifelong Brooklynite, community organizer, educator, and Red Hook resident with a passion for entrepreneurship and employment advocacy. Tavina founded her own nonprofit organization in 2012, Aesthetic Soul Community, trains residents in community organizing and capacity building. Tavina joined RHI as a member of the first cohort of Red Hook local leaders, a 10-week emergency preparedness leadership course that prepares communities to collectively respond to emergencies. Thank you so much, Tavina, for joining us this afternoon.
So next, our next expert is Juan Ramos. Juan Ramos is a longtime nonprofit manager, coalition builder, and community leader in anti-violence, housing, and human rights. Currently, Juan serves as executive director of Southside United, hopefully I'm saying this right, Los Sores, where his passion for community building and organizing allows him to expand on their housing rights advocacy, social service delivery, community food insecurity, and anti-violence efforts. Juan is committed to working with men and boys and addressing men's overall violence and wellness by challenging behaviors and norms that directly affect women, girls, and men as a whole. It's so amazing to meet all of you guys and hear everyone's intros. Y'all are great.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thank you all for joining us once again. Thank you all for taking our time to join us this afternoon. So in this particular segment, I, myself, and Sue will be asking questions to the experts to talk about, issues regarding structural racism and the community at large. So the first question is going to Carlene, and I'm gonna ask Carlene, what are some obstacles or adversities you faced doing anti-racist work?
So, I mean, I've been doing this work for about a decade, and the basis of my community organizing has always been around confronting the injustices in the criminal justice system. When I was 16 years old, one of my closest friends was charged with a crime that he didn't commit, and he did 12 years. His name was Angel Castro. And so, being a member of the Latinx community, we have our own issues around anti-Blackness. I'm Cuban. Whether you're Dominican, Puerto Rican, whether you're from Colombia or Mexico, Latinos have a lot of issues talking about Blackness because of colonization, because of white supremacy in our home countries, because of the lack of democracy and how whiteness in different countries is elevated in different institutions, the same way in America, right? So when I come into the work and I'm an organizer in the immigrant rights spaces, or if I'm organizing in the Black Lives Matter spaces, I have to acknowledge my own privilege as a white passing Latina. And I have to stand there and say, I am of the Latinx community, but I have the privilege of citizenship, and I have the privilege of colorism on my side, that institutions often look at me different than they would look at my Afro-Latina sister. And so in the work, there's a certain level of acknowledgement I have to lead with. There are difficult conversations I have to have in community with people, so people know my intention is in the right place. And I think there's a lot of education that comes with being a member of the Latino community in this moment. So when we talk about what obstacles or adversities we face, really it's just how comfortable we are with the truth. I don't think these things are obstacles, because I've been living in my truth for most of my adult life. At 16 years old, I was going to Rikers Island and I was seeing what colorism looked like in execution of the criminal justice system, right? And so I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'm gonna pass the mic over. But I think it's just really how we look at it. I don't see colorism in my work as an obstacle. If I'm screaming Black Lives Matter, I mean that an undocumented Muslim person, their life matters just as much as my neighbor on 135th Street and 5th that has been living here for 3 or 4 generations, whether it was their lineage dates back to the slave trade, or whether their family just got here 2 generations ago from the Caribbean. Their life matters. And so I just think about it in that context. Passing it back to you guys.
That was an amazing response, and just to hear it from a very strong woman, like, it makes me feel like there's just so much to be said and to be heard. That was great. I feel so intimidated, like, just being here.
We're in community right now. This is a community conversation.
Yeah.
The only difference is some of us have more experience on our paths, but you young people are tearing the way, and I am so excited just to be in conversation. Some people call me a young person, I'm 30, right? Some folks have been work more, 10, 20 years longer than I have. And so I look to get them to drop gems on me too. It's just a consistent cycle.
Mm-hmm. So the next question that we want to speak about is, Juan, how can I best deal with the injustices I advocate for and not allow it to overwhelm my mental health or internalize it? This question, I feel, really is very relevant to me right now, especially as when you're growing up and you're advocating all the time, or you're consistently putting yourself out there, it does feel a little bit draining at moments. So how can we kind of not feel overwhelmed and not let it affect our mental health?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking me. First, I just want to say that I was sitting through the whole beginning of broadcast, and I'm just amazed and truly inspired by all the young people, including you guys. We're supposed to drop gems, but I think you guys dropped some gems on us too. So I'm truly inspired by all of you, and glad to see that we have so many young people, in our communities that are willing to put themselves out there and really do the right thing by, changing the world in the way that they're trying to do it nowadays. Um, so I think, one of the things I know we experience as people of color in particular, and in my work, what I've seen is that we don't necessarily always deal with the impact of how the work is kind of overwhelming us at times. We don't stop to look at some of the realities that some of us are experiencing trauma through some of the work that we're doing, but also that we have traumatic issues that we bring along with us in the first place, that we're trying to overcome, and we don't do a great job of taking care of ourselves. So I think one of the things that needs to happen, and that I try to do often with myself and anyone I work with, is to kind of take that moment to really look at the trauma that we've all experienced, and kind of stop for a moment and intentionally take care of yourself, intentionally take care of that person that's in that movement with you, intentionally make space where we can talk about the trauma while we're trying to change the world. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And as people of color, we often are looked at like we're supposed to get over things in order to move forward. But no, we have to deal with the reality that we're impacted by multiple things, multiple pandemics, multiple forms of racism in our community, systemic racism in our community, and that we all come with a history that we really have to unpack in order to also move forward. Quick little story. I'm beyond honored to be on this panel for a couple of reasons. One, I am a man of color. I do work within nonprofit, and there is a nonprofit, structure that also doesn't do right by our communities all the time. So we have to unpack that. But I'm honored to be here because I'm also someone that's not supposed to be here. I had issues, when I was younger, when I was, the age of some of you, coming from the streets, as a former gang leader. When I decided to make changes in my life and people invested in me and my community, I wasn't accepted in every place. But one of the first people that gave me an opportunity and allowed me to deal with some of my own insecurities around who I was trying to be or achieve to be is actually Sam Amer, who's on here. When he gave me an opportunity through a program that he was running, which is a safe and sound initiative through Safe Horizon, back in my day. And people would tell him, would say to Safe Horizon, "Why are you guys bringing a gangbanger to try to make change and work with victims, work with people that are harmed?" And they had the courage to stand up and say, we want to give this person an opportunity, this young man opportunity. And that changed my life forever. And that's why I do the work I do. That's why I'm in a nonprofit, and I try to, pay it forward every day. But it starts with taking care of myself, because I know that I still, no matter what I'm doing this day and moving forward, I have a lot of trauma that I still deal with. And it's my job, I think, to pay it forward and help others that are experiencing that, especially people that are building movements, because we're not allowed that space or opportunity to do that.
I think that is so real, and we usually don't speak about ourselves. Sometimes we speak about our community, what we want to do for our community, how can we fix what's going on in our schools, in regards to like education equity and things that revolve around our communities. And sometimes we forget about ourselves for a moment. Like, how can I help myself? How, like, is this gonna make me feel better? Can I take a self-care day for one day? And sometimes maybe one day isn't enough. And I'm just slowly realizing that now. I mean, I'm 17, but when you're interacting with a lot of topics that have to do with also your life, like mine with like PTSD and things that have to do with like sexual assault, we're also speaking about it so much that sometimes we're triggering ourselves, and sometimes we're putting ourselves back in that situation. And it's hard to kind of navigate like our self-care and also helping ourselves while helping our community. So it was nice just to know that other people are also feeling the same way, that it is a little bit draining, and we should start taking care of ourselves as well.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Juan, for that wonderful story. And what I took from your answers is that people can change. And seeing you, face to face on this call, and also inspiring a lot of young people that might also be watching us on various platforms, is like people can change, and like different things could affect your life, and you could turn it around. So thank you for sharing that wonderful story, and thank you for your impact and joining us on this, on this panel, on this call. Thank you very much. Also, moving on, I'm gonna ask Tavina. I'm gonna ask you a question, and the question is, what steps and procedures are being taken by companies around the city to facilitate an anti-racist work environment?
Not much. I can speak for. I can speak for like my nonprofit. We take a part of our professional development is to like better like we learn how to better relate and engage with our participants or constituents. So we learn like about like racial equity, and we learn like about each other. So we tell like our stories and background, like where we come from. A lot of challenges in like working in some of these spaces is that when you're Black or a person of color, the people you work with aren't from where you're from. So they're ignorant, and they tend to be kind of prejudiced when you're sitting there side by side working with them in the trenches. You'd be surprised that even in this work where it's called social justice, or even in some political offices where we're on the ground organizing, we deal with a lot of racism, microaggressions, and things of that nature, and just things said out in the open blatantly to us directly and about our constituents that we're supposed to be helping, that is just shocking. And the problem is there's just not enough of us in leadership, and there's just not enough of us in, like, you see how this panel discussion, there's a nice mix of everybody. I've been in rooms where there's people talking about my neighborhood and talking about public housing, and have never lived in, worked in, or been in around it. So it's like actually allowing people to come into these like organizations or these businesses and teaching like what is racial equity, or like teaching colleagues how to better relate to each other by understanding like where we come from, where we are, like we tell stories of our name so people can pronounce our name correctly and not Americanize it. It's like those kind of like workshops and programs are needed in like these environments to make us feel good as employees doing this work, and to also make it when you hire people that are not like from the community, or like maybe have never really dealt with certain populations, it just helps them to better relate, so that like it lowers misunderstandings, if that makes sense to anyone.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. Like it
That
definitely makes sense.
makes sense. Yeah.
And I want to give
Definitely
a shout
makes
out.
a
My
lot of
niece, Nalia, is on.
Yeah.
sense.
Shout out.
Shout out
That's
to
my niece.
you
She
guys.
just texted me and said she sees me on her call. Hi, Puna.
Oh.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. But yeah, thank you very much. That completely makes sense. In workspaces and in companies, paying attention to this issue is important. So thank you for that answer. Thank you very much. So,
Okay. Yeah, that was amazing. The next question
I just wanted to
is
flag that
okay.
someone in the chat. I just wanted to flag someone in the chat asked if someone could give an example of systemic racism. And in the event that this is a young person that's looking for some clarification, I wanted to throw that back up in the deck for you guys, in case you didn't see it, just to throw it in your cues. You can give an example of systemic racism.
Systemic racism, an example of it is the fact that I don't know if people have noticed over years, but like anytime funding has to be cut, they always cut funding in our neighborhoods. Like we're always being told we can do without art programs. We're always being told we can do without a medical center. We're always told that we can like our just anything in our communities where funding is cut that can help us get ahead, that can help our young people get ahead. That's an example of systemic racism. Another part is over policing in our communities. Red Hook, we get like a lot of young people are like always harassed, arrested, just like untreated, like just we're overly policed, and like the crime rate doesn't match that need, even though
Same
it's
thing,
something they say in media.
same
And
thing
our
in schools.
right, like when they cut funding to schools, like the I remember going to high school when they first started like the metal detectors and stuff. They didn't have that in all schools. And we don't, and if I want to be clear, we don't have school shootings. We would have gang fighting, but we didn't have like mass school shootings to where we needed to be, again, police like that.
That is very true. There is schools are criminalizing these students and over policing them, putting more metal detectors, more this and that, instead of funding extra fundings like that money that's going to like metal detectors and 1 million cops at our schools. Those could go to those textbooks, to those art programs that we need to have in our schools. And I work with Teens Take Charge, and we work with desegregating NYC public high schools, and we work for making sure that we have those fundings. But that's very true. Like, our schools are over policed. Our schools continuously make many people feel like they're criminals because you're walking through the door like you're going to jail. You have to be checked, you have to be patted down, and it's definitely something that is not really spoken about. And then if you try to speak about it, people kind of like question you, like, well, why are you speaking about it? What about someone comes in here with a weapon? Well, you can go anywhere with that. But the fact that we're over criminalizing schools, like we're over policing these schools, and we're making students feel like, I feel less safe with police at my school. I feel extremely like less safe. And, then you look at schools that are predominantly Black, and those schools are over policed to the fullest extent. And then when I try to speak about it to someone, they'll say, well, the crime rate is high over there. Says who? Says who? You're inflicting this way. And if you make students feel a certain way, they're going to act that certain way because you're making them feel like they are criminals. That's like the continuous like cycle. And that's like kind of where we need to stop. So I just had to put it in there, but I very much agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. And also, real quick, I want to talk like, systemic racism or structural racism is also available in like, it has different aspects, and it affects different aspects in various ways. I know that earlier in this town hall meeting, we the youth and you the people, we've talked about how it affects healthcare and how it affects education and workspaces, and also, food, and how this sector has better food than this, or this is not available around these corners. And, all that is structural racism. And like you said, like from the word systemic racism, it's in the system. So, before you could break it, you have to break the system. And, you have to understand what the meaning is and what it could actually cause. So thank you for chiming into that.
If anyone else has anything else to add, so we move on to the next question. Oh, I clicked out. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. So the next question is towards Samuel, but anyone can answer afterwards. Where do you think racism and prejudice intersect, and what is the best explanation for why there is a difference between the two?
You're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'm very thankful to be here. Juan, thanks for the shout out. You're looking great. It's been a long time. And I appreciate your comments. And I was also very moved by the young people in terms of the first part of the panel and many of the things that were said. I mean, I think they definitely know what's going on, and they're, as we all say, they're woke. And I think that's really, really important. When I was a young person, I'm not even sure I was at that stage of development as far as being aware. So I think that they're really way ahead of the curve. So the question is, how does systemic racism intersect with discrimination? Is that what? Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was okay.
That's okay. So you want to understand the intersection between systemic
racism and prejudice. Yeah.
Okay, so and that, I think it was a two-part question. So let me take the first part. I think that there is a difference between, to my mind, that racism and discrimination. Discrimination simply, I mean, there is an overlap, right? I think when you're in the moment, no one stopped to think, well, am I being discriminated against, or this is racism, right? But I think that when you're thinking about discrimination, I think that's important to think a little bit about the behavior, right? What's happening to you based upon the way you look, for example, or who you love, for example, where do you live? The issue of gentrification came up. So when you think a little bit about what communities that you're a part of and how those communities may be over-policed, as someone indicated, that's an aspect of discrimination, right? But then when you think a little bit about racism, I mean, some people talk about anti-Black racism, because I think the language is changing, right? When I was growing up, the term racism would only apply maybe to Black people, right? But I think that many people now are using that interchangeably, so that you don't have to be just of African descent to be the victim of racism. But I think many people are talking about anti-Black racism to kind of situate that in a very specific sort of category. And so I think when you're talking about racism, you're really talking a little bit about prejudice, discrimination, bias, microaggression, racial trauma that happens to people primarily because of the way they look and because of what we call their phenotype. Your phenotype has to do with your skin color, right? Your facial expression. So, the darker you are, I think the first speaker spoke about that, the darker you are, you might be more subjected to certain kind of treatment than if you're lighter skin or lighter complexion. And so I think when you talk about racism in the 21st century, I think there is a kind of a more expansive definition of what racism is. But I think in terms of simplifying it, I think if you're talking about groups of people who have been historically suffered from racism, we're really talking about people from the diaspora, right? People from the African diaspora. And so to my mind, they do intersect, because, it's really hard to say that a person is going to experience discrimination without some degree of racism. I think there was a second part to your question. I want to make sure, was there a second part to your question, or was?
Yeah, and I said, what is the best explanation for why there is a difference between the two?
So I think the explanation is I teach at Hunter, and for years I've struggled with the word diversity. I'll put my bias out there, because when you talk about diversity, to my mind, and I don't know who people are talking about anymore, everybody's diverse. So for example, if you're in a job setting and they say we're looking for diversity, but if you look around and you see there aren't any Black women at all on staff, right? And they use the term diversity, but then when they hire someone, people that they hire may not come from that particular demographic, right? So I think that the language is very interesting, how we use language, how we understand language. And I'm constantly trying to step back and think a little bit about, like, every day there's a new way to describe something, right? And so as we have these new ways of describing certain things that are as old as sliced bread, then we also have to think a little bit about, then what is it we're talking about and what is it that we're actually expecting? So I think that in terms of to my mind, I think people just need to say what they're looking for. We have a job opening and we're looking for a Black woman. Now, some people might say, well, you run the risk of excluding other people. But if that's the person you're looking for, then be very clear about it. But when you use the word diversity, to my mind, I mean, that's just my own individual bias. I don't always know who people are talking about, because I can walk into a room and not see a lot of people in that room, and yet I hear people say this is a diverse group.
So I also wanted to lean in, and I think some of it is coming from what I'm hearing in the chat as well. To that point, we have to readjust how we're talking about the issue of systemic racism. And to this point in this moment, right, we're looking at systems around us, and one person said in the comments that the data and the narratives don't support Black lives. Why is that? Because to this point, when we talk about accessibility to resources, accessibility to support, to funding, to build those messages directly, Black and brown folks are not being supported in those ways. Even right now, when we talk about the issues of Black Lives Matter, right, as a national movement, as a call to action, we have gotten a lot of sideway and sidewalk chalk and paint. We have gotten very little systemic reform, right? And so when we talk about all of these things, it's important to look at two different systems. The legislative system that controls the state that we live in, how resources are allocated, what they do with our tax dollars, because Black and brown communities are the backbone and the bedrock of our economics. The undocumented community included, there's 11 million people living undocumented, most of which pay taxes and Social Security that can never benefit from those systems. The systems that create and collect that money then support the 1%, the Jeff Bezos that made $60 billion during the coronavirus pandemic. And those are the same people that are not paying taxes and acquiring spaces in our communities, buying properties, not paying any types of overheads to help support the issues in our communities, right? So when we talk about systemic racism, our expectation needs to be not that we're talking about anti-Blackness and that we're saying Black Lives Matter, that we're looking at the institutions, institution per institution, whether it's Columbia University in Harlem, whether it is CNN as an entity. Where are Black women? Where are Black people? Where are Black narratives? What are these spaces looking like? There's a huge issue with Adidas right now, where Adidas has been making all of these statements about Black Lives Matter, but there's a Black woman that works in Adidas that's talking about leadership ignoring a basic acknowledgement and an apology to Black people they've been exploiting, right? So we have to look at every conversation around systemic racism, apply the context, and apply a call to action of how we change it. Yes, we know that Black folks and brown folks have been systematically oppressed. Where are we standing up for and demanding that we integrate and reallocate those resources, especially post-coronavirus, when our communities have been leveled more than any other?
Thank you so much, Carleen and Dr. Samuel, for jumping on that. I think the intersection between racism or structural racism and prejudice, these are conversations that needs to be had, and how, definitely having more Black people or more people of color in places or organizations or companies is definitely something that needs to be addressed by the, American government and, people in those places. So thank you for talking about it. Thank you for touching on that topic. We appreciate you.
I want to add something to that if I can, because we also look at the systemic racism, but I want to go back a little bit to one of the questions you also added, because one of the questions was, what are companies doing? And just because we have, for example, a lot of nonprofits in our community that are supposed to be doing good work for the people in our community, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that are wrong in that. There is an industrial nonprofit complex that we sometimes shy away from talking about. But the reality is that there are nonprofits that set up in our communities with the best of intentions to do work on behalf of our people, on behalf of our community. But then we become the business of those nonprofits, right? As opposed to them making us their business. If you guys understand the difference in that, right? So I think the intentionality behind some of those nonprofits also need to shift, and some of the intentional leadership in those organizations as well. So we see a lot of nonprofits, for example, in communities of color that have been white-led for decades. Where's the intentionality about mentoring someone of color to take over at some point? Where's the intentionality of making sure you connect with your community to make sure that the way in which you're delivering services are beneficial and what that community needs and what that community wants? One of the things that we experienced during the pandemic in our organization, for example, was that we're an affordable housing organization that happens to do social work. We knew very quickly when the pandemic hit us that we had to go from securing the fact that our folks needed to continue to be in their apartments and stand behind, unlawful evictions, and us not being one of those people to do that, to also making sure that people in gentrified communities in specific can to support them, for example, not having to choose over buying food for their families versus paying their rent versus getting all the some of the other things that they need to make sure that we have a successful way of keeping folks in our community, especially those that are gentrified, because there are a lot of nonprofit leaders. Again, I want to be very clear about that. There are a lot of nonprofit leaders, a lot of nonprofits that sit in our community. They come in with the best of intentions, but we become their business all too often, and we need to change that because that's part of the problem in some of our communities of color, right? And we have to flip the script on that, for lack of a better term, and make sure that we do a lot of what we need to do in our communities around change for it to be intentional, but also to make sure that we hold people accountable for it. And that includes, like the sister said, those government folks that are responsible for driving resources to our community, to local electeds, to local boards that are responsible for the way that our communities are divided up. We have to be intentional about holding them accountable and making sure that they do things with us in mind.
That was a great explanation, and a great add-on. I think that just being here, like one part of being youth especially is unlearning and making sure you educate yourselves on what is really happening, and hearing from other people is a way that you can truly educate yourself. So I very much appreciate everybody that pitched in and spoke during this call right now. It's very inspirational to hear.
Yes, thank you so much
pass
for
it to
everyone that
Uwe.
spoke, and it is inspirational, and I'm happy to be here because I'm getting educated and I'm getting knowledge from everyone that's speaking and everyone that's saying something. So thank you. I would also like to ask another question, and this last one is it's to all the panelists. And if anybody wants to chime in, or you have an experience, or you have a story, or you want to say something about it, just feel free to talk about it. All right. So this is just how are you as panelists going to address the colorism, or if you have ideas about it, or if you want to talk about it, how do you address colorism or colorism and center darker skinned people in their work? How do you address colorism and center darker skinned people in their work, or in workspaces, or in companies, or in institutions?
As the only non-directly forward-facing Black persons, we want me to start because I always think the place for addressing racism is Black folks.
Yeah, knock yourself out. Thank you.
I mean, a big piece right now is looking around and making sure we're doing both the educational work when we show up in any space, and we're holding ourselves accountable for the way that we think spaces should operate. If I'm screaming about colorism being a problem, and in my own community, I'm understanding that I may get tapped to do things because of the way I look or the way I sound, I'm reaching back into my left and my right, and I'm making sure that I'm not allowing the system to continue to play against me or other people of color, right? And a lot of times I pass up on a lot of opportunities. I've been organizing for about 15 years. I've organized with Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, sisters that have done marches with millions of people. I've been doing logistics in the back room because most of the time it's not strategic for me to be in the front. It's important for people to hear those messages from people that are much darker in their skin tone, or have been people that have been ignored from the narrative or pushed out of frame for so many decades, that have been doing the work. So a big piece of how we show up in this moment and hold ourselves accountable is that we have to center the fact that people have been silencing Black leadership in this country for 400 years. That means that everyone having conversations around racial equity and diversity, those conversations were supposed to be had in the 60s. That means that we need to expedite where things are supposed to be right now for folks to be able to navigate the resources that their communities deserve. When we talk about everything happening right now, we need to make sure that if you're in New York City, you're challenging yourself to show up with your privilege and your resources to make sure that we're voting in alignment with policies that impact Black communities the way that they want to see their communities be impacted, right? And so that goes into police reform bills, that looks like reinvestments of social services, that looks like communities that have people returning from incarceration. How are we centering those people and those voices? I think that needs to be a conversation we have in every space, whether we're in our hospitals having those conversations, in our schools, in entertainment and media, in law, in the courts. Where are the Black voices? Who are the experts in the Black community? And what do they think about this issue? And then paying them for their time and expertise is at the core of how I think everyone that's not Black should be operating in this moment. I pass it back over to you guys.
So I just wanted to, if I may, it goes back to this notion of the anti-Blackness again, because you can't talk about colorism, to my mind, without talking about anti-Blackness. And colorism is a very, very important topic. And it manifests differently in different groups. So having said that, though, I do think that the first step is for communities to talk about it. Because I think I'm a Black man, and I've been Black all my life. And it's still a very shame-based topic in many communities. I certainly understand the macro level issues, and I think those points that are being made by the macro level issues around policies and funding and the systemic issues are really, really important. They are critically important. Both ends, macro, micro. The micro really is also how communities even begin to broach the subject of colorism. I write about it. I'm a professor, so I write about it in my own in my articles, and I do research on colorism. And I have students that are in my class, Black women mostly, who after they get to know me, Black African Americans, they struggle with this all of their lives, and there's really not enough family space and community space to sort of talk about this. So I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We certainly can take care of the macro level issues, and they're so critically important. And we can kind of bring on, again, look at an intersectional approach to then begin to talk about how do we begin to even talk about this in communities? Because communities are still feeling very ashamed about this, guilty about this, that here it is on the 21st century. And we have to also think about colorism is both inter and intra. It's inter in the sense that how white people might see people with dark skin and the microaggression that might be associated with that and the racial slights that might be associated with that. But it's also intra. It's how we as a community begin to really navigate that, because we really haven't had a chance to navigate it. Yeah, we talk about colorism as if it's this exotic notion, but it has deep-rooted psychic injury for people. You have Black girls that are growing up now, and they've done the doll study. Most of you know the doll study that was done during Board versus the Board of Education, and that was done in the 60s. They revisited that study a couple of years ago, and guess what? Young Black girls still gravitated to white dolls. And you might say, well, these are only dolls, but that's a manifestation of their psychological reality. And so my point simply is that, yes, we have to be able to understand both, tackle both, because they are very central to who we are in this moment and in this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amer, for that wonderful continuation of that topic. So right now, we've come to the end of this particular Dropping Gem segment. Thank you all for your wonderful contributions. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for having this conversation with young people, dropping knowledge on us. I've learned a lot from this. And thank you so much for joining us. So
Yes, thank you all so much for the input. Sorry, we're on very tight schedule. And so we just want to tell the people to join the Facebook group to keep the discussion going. But it was amazing hearing from everyone and seeing everyone's faces. So thank you, and thank you for listening to the youth.
definitely. Now I'm going to throw it back to our host.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abube and Sue, for facilitating that very insightful discussion. And now I'm going to pass it to Jess to introduce our next performer.
So our next performer is Ice Coley. Cole, aka Ice Coley, is a freshman at Howard University intending to study business. He loves playing basketball and listening to music. He always had a passion for writing and expresses it through poetry and music. As he grows, he continues to look for opportunities to hone his writing skills and connect with others. So let's give it up for Ice Coley.
Hello everyone. Y'all dropped a lot of gems. I was listening, and thank you for all the insight you gave us. This poem is called COVID, Cops Oblivious, Violence Ignites Debacle. I can't wait to tell my kids about this year. When they complaining because they can't go out and play with their friends, I'm going to remind them about a time we was forced to stay inside. We couldn't go nowhere. See, I lived through a global pandemic, but we've been living in a national pandemic for years now. Sick and tired of seeing another brother submissive to badges, another father stripped from his family, another son lost his footing on the way home because pigs want to shower in the mud. We can't step outside, the virus gonna kill us. We can't go on a jog, there's a cinder block in the lock with our feet. We can't breathe, please, I can't breathe. They foot on our neck. I thought we were social distancing, but the rule's different when they see melanin. Mask up so it looks like you a criminal. Don't forget your gloves. Anything you touch might be infected. Matter of fact, stay home. The virus is airborne. No, the virus is hereditary, and I won't stay home. I can't stay home. My name is George Floyd. I lost my job by staying home. I got to put clothes on the back of my 6-year-old daughter. So if you insist we stay home, I insist you quarantine police brutality. And if not, when the revolution comes, the revolution will be televised. You shot your target, we burned our target, put it all on the cameras. 2020, this a fucking movie. It ain't no horror film. This is a documentary for all our fallen soldiers. Rest in power. And we recording it so our kids could watch it without being an actor. That's why I don't want you going outside, son. There's a virus, a deadly virus called COVID. And I hope there's no need for that convo though. I hope I can send my son outside to play with his friends. All I could do is hope. We locked down, all I could do is hope. Behind the screen, yet I still hope. Because when we hope as a whole, we got the power to end COVID.
Thank you, Cole. I literally have chills. Everyone send all that positivity his way. That was really, really great. And yeah, next up, we're going to enter our call to action segment. So we're going to invite all the moderators to join us back. So that would be Abube, Kervin, Sue, and Rayanne. And yeah, we're going to start all call to action. So everybody in the audience get ready because we're going to be having a very insightful conversation with the youth now.
So what change do you guys want to see?
I want to see a education that is for everyone. I don't want to see a whitewashed education anymore. I want to see people actually learning about where they've come from and who they are. You know, being from I'm Lebanese. We don't hear about Middle Eastern women or people in general seen as more than just a danger, seen as more than just people that are someone that you can't have a conversation with. And every time, like, I had to change my full name because I kept getting asked questions about who I was and who my parents were. And, you know, having that whole idea of like some people are dangerous because of where they've come from. I want to see that change, and that also comes from our education. Like, we're not being represented anywhere in our textbooks and our by even our teachers. You know, I think one time I had like, you know, a Lebanese teacher one time, she said my name in Arabic, and I was like, that's amazing, because we don't see that. You know, I want to see more Black counselors, more Black teachers. That's something starting in our schools, especially at a young age, is something that we need, because we're always in school and we will be raised that way instead of continuously having this whitewashed education.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I completely and utterly agree. I live in a primarily white town. There's all of at least, I mean, at most 20 Black kids in my entire like school. And yeah, there's no Black teachers that teach any of the main subjects. There are two Black study skills teachers and one Black teacher who works with the A students, and that's really it. So, and I'm French, Mexican, and Guyanese. The only Hispanic teachers teach Spanish, and you know, that's really great. There's a connection there, but other than that, like, there's really no like diversity. There's no representation in my school. So the first thing that I want to see is really like understanding and acknowledgement, which is, I'm seeing a lot of it right now. But if anyone was viewing the comments during live stream, there's also not a lot of it as well. People are still trying to not force themselves to educate them. They're not trying to educate themselves. They're still trying to stay ignorant. And so the first thing I want to see is just simple understanding. And that definitely does come with the teachers too, because they don't understand things as well. Like, I've had teachers who, you know how you were saying that your teacher pronounced your name in Arabic. My name doesn't need to be pronounced differently, but I've had teachers who don't look at me when I say that I'm here for attendance, because my last name is a Jewish last name, and everybody in my school for the most part is Jewish, and I just don't match their physical traits, so people really don't think that I'm me when I'm saying that's my name. And it's just the teachers are the ones who need to be educated too. It's not just the students. So I definitely agree that starting in schools is definitely the place to be, because we're going to be in school for a large portion of our lives. And yeah, that's definitely where I want to see change first. Okay, so if no one has any other comments, we're gonna go to the next question.
Yeah.
We can bring it back to this one though.
I do have a call to action, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, I have a call to my call to action is a two-part way. One to the young people, and one to everyone in general. For young people, I believe young people should be educated about this issue. And as Chelsea just said, you know, education and knowledge is power. And once young people have the power or have the knowledge about what structural racism is and what structural racism is, and how we grew and how it was passed on from generation to generation without these generations even knowing they are under this siege. I feel when we have the knowledge about it, we are able to break it. And that's the first way that young people could break it, by having the knowledge about it. And we could break it and prevent us from passing it to our next generation. So that's my call to action for young people. Get educated and find knowledge about this issue and about this topic. And that would be a great conversation for you to have. Also, my second call to action for everyone, and this is something I want everyone to participate in. I want us to start a hashtag that says hashtag stop systemic racism. You know, we see how hashtags go around and they go viral, and you know, so I want this to be one of that. So even if you could start from right now and like put in comments from Facebook to YouTube and just put like hashtag stop systemic racism, and you know, along the week, if you post something or you post a photo that that signifies this type of action, or a tweet that signifies this action, make sure you add hashtag stop systemic racism. So please, let's make sure we participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Abube. That was very insightful. Another call to action that you guys can do if you're between the ages of 13 and 24, the youth, we ask that you guys check out amplifyapp.org. It's an incentivized survey platform to take our Youth X Youth survey. These surveys are created by youth for youth. We need your expertise on your education, your health, your economics, and your community in order to influence and guide our youth agenda to influence our future mayor. Again, that is amplifyapp.org. And guys, we have incentives. We have gift cards to give away. So again, we need your expertise to help move these movements and help create policy changes?
All right. So my call to action is coming actually from what I was reading from inside of the YouTube live chat. It's scary and also sad to see how some young people or even some old folks hiding behind like racial slurs name or using their so-called power to try to even minimize some other people or try to just like minimize what's going on or try to say, okay, it's okay to be white. And nobody said it was not okay to be white. And nobody said it was not okay to have privileges. But one thing that they need to know, one thing that you all need to know, it's really about what's been going on for decades. Nobody was born racist. You learn to become racist. And the same way they taught you to become racist is the same way you can stop being racist. The call to action will be for parents and all the white people who say they are allies. Start by teaching your young people acceptance for everybody. Start by teaching your young kids that somebody being black doesn't mean that he's your enemy. Start by telling them that, okay, when you're about to be a cop in your future, when you see a black man or black woman, it doesn't mean that they always have a gun. It doesn't mean that they're uneducated. I think the miseducation comes from those who were not able to accept us as young people who are being people of color. It's not even a miseducation no more. Actually, I laugh about it. It's actually that you're actually being afraid of what's coming up. Because when the change is coming up, when what you feared the most is coming up, when you feel like when you see that young people are just like waking up to what's going on, that's when you fear what you almost thought like was going on. Education. The call to action would be educate black people, educate white people, so we can all come into acceptance for one of each other. Thank you.
I have to say that my call to action would be seeing groups not separated in school. When I'm at school, when I'm in my cafeteria, I see different groups of people with their ethnicities. I want there to be, I want everyone to be in one big group instead of in the cafeteria having different tables for different races and different, groups of people. Everyone should be together. And once I see that, I think that once that happens, I think that we'll be on the right track, because that's still not happening. And there's still people being bullied for being a different race or being different. And that's my call to action.
Okay, I want to thank all of you guys for sharing your call to actions and everybody in the audience for participating and using the hashtag. And hopefully you guys will all partake in all the call to actions that we brought up. And now I'm going to pass it to Jess.
So now we have a question for you. We need you to take out your phones and we need you to scan the QR code and complete the evaluation. And we need to hear from you, your thoughts.
So I'll give you guys all a moment to do that. Okay. Also, we hope that you'll all be able to join us at our next town hall, which is going to be Wednesday, October 21st. And if you want to keep the conversation going, feel free to join our Facebook group, because this is only the beginning of what we're going to make. We're going to make some real change, and it starts with using our voices, especially the youth.
If you want to learn more about this town hall and all participants, visit the town hall webpage. Interested in participating in future halls? Drop your email in the comments and an engagement specialist will contact you.
As well, be sure to download the Heroes Against Hate comic that was developed by the hashtag NYC Youth. Copy the bit.ly link. This is just one other example of the skills and talents that we, the youth, really possess.
There are also several workshops that are open to all scheduled during the month of September. Visit the website for the registration link, get educated, and learn how to system work so that you can be part of the change.
We want to thank DYCD and all our partners for participating. We hope you enjoyed yourself. Drop us a thumbs up or down, or drop some fire, and thanks for joining.
All right, guys. Thank you. Take it easy.